Chapter 1. The Mysterious Arrival. The small, unassuming town of Brackley was one of those places that rarely appeared in the papers, and the only excitement it often saw was the annual fair. Situated on the outskirts of London, with its cobblestone streets and charming thatched cottages, Brackley could have been a model for any English village postcard. But beneath the surface of idyllic tranquillity, even the most peaceful of places can hide secrets. The morning was warm, with the promise of spring just beginning to unfurl. Birds were singing, and the sound of children's laughter could be heard as they hurried past the rows of shops on the high street. The day had begun much like any other, and the post office, with its heavy wooden door and chipped paint, was quietly receiving its usual flow of letters. Hercule Poirot, standing inside, surveyed the quiet scene before him with his usual meticulous attention to detail. He had arrived earlier that morning, taking the train from London, as his old friend Captain Hastings had invited him for a brief respite away from the constant whirl of cases. Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, flicked to a small suitcase that sat unattended near the counter. The worn leather case, weathered by time, looked completely out of place in the otherwise pristine surroundings. A neatly tied tag hung from the handle, and yet there was no sign of its owner. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Hastings, who was standing just a few steps behind him, admiring a row of brightly coloured postcards. "Do you not see? There is something unusual about that suitcase." Hastings looked at the old case and raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? It's just luggage, Poirot. Someone probably left it behind." Poirot shook his head, a small frown creasing his brow. "Ah, Hastings, you have much to learn about observation. This luggage, it is not simply forgotten. No, it has been left here intentionally. But for what reason, that is the question." The station master, an elderly man with a gruff but kind face, was busy sorting some papers behind the counter. Poirot walked over, his steps light but purposeful. "Excuse me, monsieur," Poirot began, his voice smooth and precise. "This suitcase, whose is it? It appears to be abandoned." The station master looked up, momentarily surprised. "Oh, that old thing? It was left here this morning. We thought perhaps it belonged to someone on the train that just left. No one has come forward to claim it, though. I've been meaning to send it along to Lost and Found." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Is it truly unclaimed? Have you checked the train's passenger list?" The station master nodded. "Yes, of course, but it didn't match any of the passengers who boarded. Odd, isn't it?" "Très odd, indeed," Poirot murmured, as he turned back to inspect the suitcase. He bent down, adjusting his bow tie before looking at the tag more closely. Hastings walked up beside him, trying to understand what had caught Poirot's interest. "What's so special about this, Poirot? It's just a suitcase. Couldn't someone have simply forgotten it?" Poirot stood upright, his sharp gaze never leaving the luggage. "Hastings, that is precisely what makes this so intriguing. No, one forgets their luggage unless they have something to hide. It is the nature of human beings to protect their belongings, their possessions. And yet here we are, with a suitcase left behind. Deliberately, I suspect." Before Hastings could respond, Poirot motioned for him to follow as he walked toward the back of the station, where a small office was located. "I have a theory, Hastings, one that is taking shape as we speak. The key to solving this mystery lies not in the suitcase itself, but in the person who left it behind. Whoever owns it, they want to remain unseen. Hastings, intrigued but somewhat confused, followed closely behind his friend. "Do you think someone was in danger?" Poirot's eyes twinkled with a hint of amusement. "Danger? Perhaps. Or perhaps they simply do not wish to be found. But we will see. We shall begin by looking at the suitcase itself." Inside the office, Poirot immediately began to study the case with all the precision of a watchmaker inspecting a finely tuned timepiece. He ran his fingers across the leather, noticing the subtle wear on the handle, as if it had been grasped tightly on many occasions. The clasp was old but well maintained, the metal glinting despite its age. Poirot examined the tag again. There was no name, only a cryptic address in Paris. "Ah, Hastings," Poirot murmured. "Do you see? This is no ordinary suitcase. The tag, it has been tampered with. Look at the ink. It has been smudged, the letters faint. A hasty attempt to disguise the name and address, but not careful enough. Someone wanted to leave no trace, but they failed." Hastings leaned in closer, examining the tag himself. "You're right, Poirot. It's all blurry. Why would anyone bother?" Exactly, Poirot said. "It is the why that interests me. Someone wanted to hide their identity, but they were in too much of a rush to do it properly. It tells me that something urgent occurred, something that forced the owner to leave, in haste." Poirot turned to the station master, who had followed them into the room. "Has anyone else come looking for the luggage?" The station master shook his head. "No, sir. It's been here for hours, and no one has asked about it." "Then I suggest, monsieur, that you keep the suitcase here for now," Poirot said with finality. "I will return shortly, and we will see if anyone claims it." As Poirot and Hastings left the office, Hastings couldn't help but feel a slight sense of unease. There was something about this case that didn't sit right with him. Something about the abandoned suitcase that hinted at more than just an oversight. "What do you think, Poirot?" Hastings asked as they walked out of the station into the soft afternoon light. "What are we dealing with here?" Poirot, ever the thinker, paused for a moment before answering. "We are dealing, mon ami, with a puzzle that will reveal itself to me soon enough. Whoever left that suitcase behind is hiding something. Of that I am certain. The question is, what are they running from?" They stood for a moment in silence, the quiet of the town almost too serene for such a mystery to unfold. But Poirot knew all too well. Beneath the calm exterior, danger was lurking, and the game was only just beginning. Chapter 2. The Unclaimed. Luggage. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over Brackley, as Poirot and Hastings made their way back toward the station. The peaceful village had not changed much since their arrival, but the sense of anticipation in the air had deepened. Poirot was unusually quiet, his thoughts a whirl of possibilities. There was no immediate explanation for the abandoned suitcase, and yet Poirot knew instinctively that it was not as simple as it seemed. "Do you see, Hastings?" Poirot asked as they walked side by side. "The situation grows ever more curious. It is not just the suitcase that intrigues me, but the fact that no one has come forward to claim it. In such a place as Brackley, the simplest of things become a matter of great importance." Hastings, glancing over at his friend, still found it difficult to understand the gravity of the situation. I'm still not sure I understand why this suitcase is so significant, Poirot. It could be just a mix-up or someone's carelessness. Poirot smiled that familiar knowing smile of his. Ah, mon ami, it is precisely because of its ordinary appearance that I find it so compelling. The ordinary is often the most extraordinary when examined closely. Look at the details, Hastings. The hurriedly scrawled address on the tag, the worn edges of the leather. Someone wants us to believe this is a simple matter of forgetfulness, but I assure you there is no such thing as coincidence in my work. The two men arrived back at the station, where the station master had been keeping an eye on the suitcase. His duties were interrupted only by a quiet conversation with a few local villagers who had gathered to catch up on news. But when Poirot returned, the elderly man straightened up. "Ah, there you are, monsieur," the station master said. "I've kept the suitcase as you requested, but no one has come looking for it yet." Poirot nodded, acknowledging the man's efforts, then walked toward the suitcase, which sat just where they had left it, resting in the corner of the room. His eyes glinted as he examined it once again, his mind working swiftly behind that sharp, calculating gaze. "There is something more to this," Poirot murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "This is not a mistake. Whoever left it with a purpose." He began to gently run his fingers along the seams, as if feeling for some hidden clue. As his hands skimmed over the fabric of the luggage, Poirot's eyes caught something out of the corner of his eye. A small indentation, barely noticeable, near the base of the suitcase. He crouched down, his eyes narrowing as he inspected the spot more closely. There, just below the leather, was a faint but deliberate mark, like a scuff caused by something sharp. Poirot gently brushed his fingers over it, feeling the texture of the scratch beneath. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. "Hastings," Poirot said, standing upright, "I think we are no longer dealing with a forgotten suitcase. This mark, this scratch, this is a clue. It suggests someone was in a rush, perhaps even carrying something inside this case that needed to be concealed quickly. The question is, what was so important that it had to be hidden away so hastily?" Before Hastings could reply, the station master interrupted, his face creased with worry. "Monsieur Poirot, you must see this," the station master said, holding out a small folded piece of paper. It was crumpled and worn, as though it had been handled repeatedly. "I found this stuck to the underside of the suitcase. It was hidden in a small pocket." Poirot took the paper carefully from the station master's hand and unfurled it. The words were written in a hurried scrawl, the ink slightly smudged, as if written under pressure. Poirot read aloud the message that was scrawled on the page. "Meet me at the old chapel at midnight. Bring the key. No one must know." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "What does this mean? Is it some kind of code?" Poirot was silent for a moment, turning the paper over in his hand as if considering the significance of the words. "A meeting at the old chapel, midnight, and a key. This suggests we are dealing with a matter of great secrecy, Hastings, a secret that someone is willing to go to extreme lengths to protect." The station master, whose curiosity had been piqued by the conversation, stepped forward. "The old chapel, monsieur. That's a crumbling place on the outskirts of town. It's been abandoned for years. No one goes there any more." Poirot looked at the man, a slight frown on his face. "Exactly. That is why it is so important. Someone with something to hide would choose a place that is forgotten, abandoned, a place where no one would think to look. Poirot turned to Hastings. "We must go to the chapel, Hastings, at midnight, as the message suggests, but first we must find out more about the key. There is no doubt in my mind that it holds the answers to the riddle we are trying to solve." With that, Poirot handed the crumpled paper back to the station-master. "Keep this paper in your possession, but do not share it with anyone. We must move carefully, for the ones involved in this mystery will be watching." The station-master nodded, a worried look on his face. "I will do as you ask, monsieur, but what exactly are you looking for?" Poirot's expression remained calm, though his eyes gleamed with purpose. "I am looking for a person, someone who has been in Brackley recently, someone with a great deal to hide. The suitcase is only the beginning, monsieur. The key, the chapel, the message, all of it is part of a much larger puzzle, and I will solve it." As Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave, the clock on the wall ticked ominously, its ticking echoing through the quiet station. Outside, the day was fading into evening, and the village was slowly settling into its peaceful routine. But for Poirot, the night ahead promised only mystery and danger. Hastings was deep in thought as they walked toward the small inn where they were staying for the night. "So, we're to wait until midnight? That's rather late for an investigation. Poirot, what do we do in the meantime?" Poirot paused for a moment, considering his response. "We wait, mon ami, but we do not rest. There are things we must learn before the meeting at the chapel, people to question, things to observe, and most importantly, we must find that key." The evening passed quietly, with the last light of day disappearing over the horizon. Brackley, ever so serene, seemed untouched by the dark currents running beneath its surface. But Poirot knew better than to be deceived by the quiet. In his mind, the pieces of the puzzle were already beginning to fit together, though the full picture remained obscured. At midnight the mystery would deepen, and Poirot was prepared to follow the trail wherever it led. But for now, all he could do was wait and observe. Chapter 3. Midnight at the Chapel. The moon hung low over Brackley, its pale light casting long shadows across the village. The night was cool and still, with only the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional distant murmur of a late-night conversation disturbing the quiet. Poirot, ever the meticulous observer, had kept his thoughts focused as the hours ticked away. Hastings, on the other hand, had grown restless. Despite Poirot's unshakable confidence, the suspense of the coming midnight meeting seemed to weigh heavily on him. He had never been one to be comfortable with secrecy, and the idea that someone was deliberately concealing something in their midst only deepened his unease. "I must admit, Poirot," Hastings said as they walked toward the outskirts of the village, "this whole affair feels rather ominous, don't you think? An old chapel, a mysterious meeting, and a key. It seems as though we are stepping into the unknown." Poirot glanced over at his friend, a small smile playing on his lips. "That, Hastings, is the essence of every case I undertake. The unknown, the hidden truths, the secrets that people desperately want to keep buried. But we will uncover them, as always. In time, everything comes to light." The two men reached the edge of the village, where the chapel stood like a forgotten relic from another era. The building was weathered and worn, its stone walls cracked by time, the roof partially caved in. It was a place that had long been abandoned, its former purpose lost to history. Yet tonight, the chapel would serve as the setting for the unravelling of a mystery far darker than anything Brackley had ever known. Poirot stopped just outside the chapel's overgrown gates, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the area. There was no sign of movement, no indication that anyone else had arrived yet. The place was eerily quiet. "We are early, mon ami," Poirot said, adjusting his coat and looking at the clock tower in the distance. "But that is of no consequence. We will wait." Hastings nodded, his discomfort palpable. He wasn't used to Poirot's calm demeanour in the face of uncertainty. As they stood in silence, the only sound was the occasional rustling of the wind through the trees. Despite the cool air, Hastings could feel a trickle of sweat running down his back. "I must admit, Poirot," Hastings muttered, "I find it hard to believe anyone would come out here at such a late hour. It feels as though the whole thing is a trap." Poirot turned to him, his gaze sharp and reassuring. "A trap, perhaps. But it is one I intend to spring, Hastings. It is not the first time I have faced such a situation, and it will not be the last. Trust me. Our adversary is clever, but they have underestimated me." As the minutes passed, the air grew heavier, charged with the anticipation of what was to come. The chapel loomed in front of them, its dark silhouette an unsettling presence against the starry sky. The sense of foreboding deepened, and Hastings felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Yet Poirot remained unmoved, standing with his back straight, his hands tucked behind him in his usual thoughtful pose. At last, just as the clock in the distance struck midnight, a figure appeared at the entrance to the chapel. Poirot's sharp eyes had already noticed the subtle movement in the shadows, but he did not stir. He simply observed, his expression unreadable. The figure moved with caution, slipping inside the chapel's dilapidated doors, a small dark shape against the pale backdrop of the moon. "That is our person," Poirot whispered, his voice low. "We must follow, but quietly. No sudden movements." Hastings nodded, and the two men carefully made their way toward the chapel, their footsteps muffled by the thick grass beneath their feet. The moonlight cast a faint glow on the ruins of the building, illuminating the path ahead as they approached the entrance. Poirot signalled to Hastings to stay behind him as they slipped through the cracked door, entering the chapel's cold interior. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the remnants of forgotten rituals scattered across the floor. The chapel was empty save for the figure they had been following, who now stood at the altar, their back to the door. They were holding something small, glinting faintly in the moonlight. Poirot's eyes flicked to the object, his mind already racing with possibilities. It could be the key they had been seeking, the key to the entire puzzle. The figure turned, their face obscured by the shadows. Poirot motioned for Hastings to remain still, his gaze fixed on the unknown individual. There was something unsettling about the way they moved, almost too deliberate, as though every action had been planned with great care. "I have brought it," the figure said, their voice low and hoarse. "The key. But you must take care. They are watching. You are not the only ones who are looking for it." The words hung in the air, cryptic and full of threat. The figure held the key out toward the altar, its surface gleaming in the faint light. Poirot stepped forward, his movements measured and deliberate. He could feel the tension building in the room, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. "I see, monsieur," Poirot said smoothly, his voice cutting through the silence. "You have brought the key. But for whom exactly are you bringing it?" The figure stiffened, as though caught off guard by the question. For a brief moment there was a hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty in their posture. Poirot seized the opportunity. "You are not alone in this," Poirot continued, his tone insistent. "There are others involved, are there not? Others who seek the key as much as you do, and they will stop at nothing to get it." The figure finally turned, their face revealed for the first time in the dim light. It was a woman, her features sharp and angular, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. She was holding the key tightly in her hand, her knuckles white with the strain. "You're wrong," the woman said, her voice shaking. "I'm not one of them. I'm just trying to protect it. I don't want anyone else to have it." Poirot's eyes locked onto hers. He could see the fear in her eyes, but there was also something else, something more, a lie, a story half told. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but there were still so many gaps. "You are lying, madame," Poirot said softly, his voice calm but firm. "There is something more you are not telling me. But rest assured, I will find out what it is. And I will find out who else is involved in this conspiracy." The woman's face twisted in fear, her grip tightening on the key. She took a step back, as if considering fleeing, but Poirot was too quick. He stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Give it to me," he said, his voice a firm command. "Now." For a moment it seemed as though the woman might resist. But then, with a sudden jerky motion, she dropped the key into Poirot's palm. "Take it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's yours now, but you must be careful. If you do not know how to use it, they will come for you next." With that, the woman turned and fled into the darkness, her figure disappearing into the night. Poirot stood still, holding the key in his hand, his mind working quickly. The mystery had taken its first true turn. And Poirot knew, without a doubt, that they were not alone in this quest. The game had only just begun. Chapter 4. The Key to Secrets. Unravelled Poirot and Hastings stood in the silent ruins of the chapel, the faint echoes of the woman's retreating footsteps fading into the distance. The tension that had gripped the air only moments ago now seemed to hang heavier, like a veil of secrecy enveloping them. The key, cold, smooth, and gleaming, remained firmly in Poirot's hand, its significance not lost on him. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" Hastings asked, his voice tinged with curiosity, yet filled with that same unease that had accompanied them into the chapel. "This key, the woman, there's something unsettling about it all. What are we involved in now?" Poirot did not respond immediately. His mind was working, as always, processing the details of what had transpired. He turned the key over in his palm, examining it closely. It was small, made of tarnished brass, with intricate engravings that seemed to tell a story. The designs were foreign, not the typical ornamentation one might find on an object of such a humble nature. It was a mystery in itself, one that Poirot was determined to solve. Hastings shifted uncomfortably, glancing around the chapel once more. What do you think she meant by, "They will come for you next"? Who is she talking about, Poirot? Who is after this key? Ah, Hastings, Poirot said with a quiet smile. That, mon ami, is the puzzle we must solve. For it is clear that this key is no ordinary object. It holds a secret, perhaps several secrets, and those who seek it are not so easily deterred. Hastings scratched his chin, his brow furrowed in thought. But why the chapel? Why bring it here, of all places? It's hardly a secure location. Why not simply hand it over to whoever it is she's protecting it from? Indeed, Poirot said softly, eyes fixed on the door through which the woman had fled. That is a question worth asking. But the answer is not as simple as it appears. You see, Hastings, the chapel is a symbol. It is a place of concealment, a place that is both forgotten and yet ever present in the minds of those who know its history. Whoever wanted this key could not have been unaware of its association with such a location. It is a message in itself. Poirot slipped the key into his pocket and turned to leave the chapel. The building seemed even more oppressive in the quiet dark of night, its abandoned walls whispering secrets from a time long past. Poirot walked with purpose, Hastings trailing behind him. We will begin by investigating who the woman was, Poirot continued, his voice resolute, and why she felt the need to protect this key from those who are clearly dangerous. But we don't know who they are, Poirot, Hastings countered, his voice still laced with confusion. We don't even know what the key unlocks. How are we supposed to find out who's behind all this? Poirot stopped in his tracks and turned to face his companion, his eyes gleaming with determination. Ah, mon ami, that is where you are mistaken. We do know one thing. We know that the key leads to something much bigger than we can imagine. And in order to uncover the truth, we must first follow the path it has set before us. We will find the woman, and we will uncover who else is involved. And then, Hastings, we shall see the full picture unfold. They made their way back to the village, the streets bathed in the cool silver light of the moon. The quiet was almost unbearable, the night itself holding its breath in anticipation. Hastings could not shake the sense of urgency that seemed to hang in the air. Poirot, however, remained as calm as ever, his thoughts turning over every detail as they made their way through the village and back to their lodging. "Where do we start, Poirot?" Hastings asked once they had reached their small guest house, the front door creaking open as they stepped inside. "The woman's gone now, and we're left with a key and a cryptic warning. What's our next step?" Poirot set his hat aside and turned to face Hastings. "We start with the obvious. Hastings," he said, his voice quiet but certain. "We speak to the locals. We gather information. There are always people who know more than they let on. It is not by accident that the woman came to this village tonight. There is a connection here, and it is our task to uncover it." "Right," Hastings said slowly, nodding. "I suppose we should see if anyone in the village knows who she is. Maybe someone saw her enter the chapel, or knows where she went after she left. Poirot's eyes sparkled with quiet amusement. "Exactly, Hastings. You are learning." He gave a small chuckle, and while we are at it, we should not overlook the possibility that the key itself may have been intended for someone specific, someone who is not entirely unknown to this village. It was a small lead, but it was all they had for now. Poirot knew that in the world of mysteries, even the smallest of clues could lead to a larger truth. He felt it in his bones. This case was more intricate than it appeared, and they were only at the beginning of unravelling its layers. The next morning, Poirot and Hastings set out early, the fog still clinging to the ground as they walked down the cobbled streets of Brackley. The village was just beginning to stir, the shopkeepers unlocking their doors, the scent of fresh bread wafting from the bakery. Yet, for Poirot, the scene before him seemed almost unreal. A backdrop to a game that had already begun, one where the stakes were high and the outcome uncertain. Their first stop was the village inn, a small establishment frequented by travellers and locals alike. The innkeeper, a stout middle-aged man named Mr. Langley, was a good place to start. He had lived in Brackley for many years, and was often the first to hear rumours and gossip. "Ah, Poirot, good morning." Mr. Langley greeted them with a nod as they entered the warm, dimly lit interior. "I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you," Poirot replied with his usual grace. "But we are here with a question, Monsieur Langley. Have you by chance seen a woman around the village in the past day or so? Dark hair, thin, perhaps a little nervous in her manner?" Mr. Langley rubbed his chin thoughtfully, as though trying to recall such a person. I think I may have seen someone like that. It was yesterday, just after supper. She was walking along the main road near the chapel, looking around as though expecting someone. Didn't seem like the sort to be around here, not that I mind. We do get all sorts, don't we?" Poirot's interest piqued. "Did she say anything to you, monsieur, or to anyone else, perhaps?" Langley hesitated, his brow furrowing. "Now that you mention it, she did seem a bit jumpy. She asked if anyone knew of the chapel's history, and whether it had ever been used for special purposes. But that was all. She left just after speaking to me." Poirot exchanged a quick glance with Hastings. "Merci, monsieur. Your information has been most helpful." As they left the inn, Poirot's mind worked through the possibilities. The woman had been asking about the chapel's history. She had been looking for something, perhaps something hidden there. "There is a connection between her and the chapel, Hastings," Poirot said as they walked back toward the heart of the village. "We will return there tomorrow and search for any clue that might explain what it is she was looking for." Hastings looked at him, a bit unsure. "And if we don't find anything?" Poirot's eyes twinkled with his usual confidence. "Then, mon ami, we will find another way. The key has opened the door. Now, we simply need to find the right path." Chapter 5. The Unfolding Mystery. The morning mist had cleared by the time Poirot and Hastings reached the chapel again. The old stone structure stood like a silent sentinel, its weathered walls holding secrets of centuries gone by. The village, still slow to rouse itself from the fog of dawn, seemed unaware of the weight the chapel carried in the unfolding drama. As Poirot stood at the entrance, his eyes flickered over the grounds with a sharp, analytical gaze. "Do you think we'll find "Something this time, Poirot?" Hastings asked, his voice carrying the faintest hint of uncertainty. "Ah, mon ami," Poirot replied, adjusting his coat. "We must keep our minds open. It is in places like this, so seemingly ordinary, that the greatest mysteries often lie hidden." They walked around the chapel's exterior, the stone cold beneath, their feet, their eyes scanning for anything unusual. Poirot seemed to find something in every detail. The ivy creeping up the side of the building, the cracked windows, the remnants of old stains on the stone floor within. Each element, while trivial on its own, seemed to suggest more when viewed through Poirot's lens of observation. "There is something to this chapel, Hastings," Poirot murmured as he walked to the rear of the building. He knelt down and studied a patch of the ground carefully. A faint imprint was visible in the dirt, barely perceptible, as though someone had been standing there recently. Poirot's fingers brushed the spot, and his expression grew more thoughtful. "What is it, Poirot?" Hastings asked, stepping closer. "A sign," Poirot replied simply, still examining the dirt. "A sign that someone was here, hiding something, or perhaps looking for something." He looked up at his companion, his sharp eyes gleaming. "We have learned something important already, Hastings. The woman's visit here was no accident. She came with a purpose, and she was looking for something within these walls." "Looking for something," Hastings echoed, confused. "But what could she possibly have been looking for in a place like this?" Poirot rose slowly and dusted off his knees. "The chapel is old, yes, but old buildings like these often hold things that are forgotten, things that people want hidden. There is no coincidence in the way she asked about its history. She was not just a tourist or a passing traveller. She knew more than she let on." Hastings nodded slowly, still trying to piece together the puzzle. "So, what now, Poirot? Do we look inside?" Poirot's gaze swept over the chapel once more. We must look inside, but with care. There are many who would not appreciate an outsider investigating too deeply." They entered the chapel cautiously, and Poirot immediately began inspecting the interior with methodical precision. His eyes traced the lines of the wooden pews, the crumbling altar, and the dusty old stained-glass windows. His fingers brushed along the walls, probing every crevice, every gap, searching for any clue the woman might have left behind. At the far end of the chapel, near the altar, Poirot paused. The stone there was slightly discoloured, as though it had been disturbed recently. He kneeled and carefully inspected the area, his eyes narrowing as he saw a faint indentation in the stone, a hidden compartment. Poirot smiled softly to himself and motioned for Hastings to come closer. "Look here, Hastings," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "The woman was not just here to admire the architecture. She was searching for something, and I believe she found it." Hastings bent down to see what Poirot had discovered, a small hidden latch beneath the floor stone. Poirot carefully pried it open, revealing a shallow cavity. Inside was a small weathered leather pouch. Poirot pulled it free, his fingers brushing over the worn leather as he opened it. Inside there were two items, a folded piece of paper and something that gleamed faintly in the dim light. Poirot's hand reached for the paper first. He unfolded it carefully, and as he scanned its contents, his face betrayed a flicker of recognition. "It is a map, Hastings," he murmured, his voice filled with quiet intensity. "A map that leads to a place in the village, one that is not marked on any public map." "A hidden place?" Hastings asked, leaning over to see. "Yes, a place of secrecy," Poirot confirmed. "But it is not the map that interests me most. It is what I see next that holds the key." Poirot reached into the pouch again and pulled out a small golden charm. It was an hourglass, its sands appearing to swirl ever so slightly inside, as though it were suspended in time. The gleam of gold caught the light, casting faint shadows against the stone walls. Poirot turned the hourglass over in his hand, observing its weight and design. "This is no ordinary piece of jewellery," Poirot said thoughtfully. "This hourglass has been made with great care, and yet it is not meant to be worn as a trinket. No, mon ami, it is a message." "A message?" Hastings asked, clearly puzzled. "But it looks like a simple decorative piece." "Appearances can be deceiving," Poirot replied with a knowing smile. "This hourglass, its design, its very composition, is not random. It is a clue, and it is tied to something important. I believe the woman left it here for us to find, and we will soon learn its significance." Hastings looked at the charm, his brow furrowed. "Do you think it's related to the key we found earlier? The one the woman was hiding?" Poirot nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the hourglass. "Yes, Hastings, I do believe the two are connected. The key, the woman's warning, the map, and now this hourglass. Each of these pieces forms part of a puzzle that will lead us to the truth." Poirot rose to his feet, brushing the dust from his trousers. "Now we must find out where the map leads. We must follow it, Hastings. And when we do, we will uncover the answers we seek." "But what if we're not the only ones looking for the answers?" Hastings asked, the question lingering in the air. Poirot's smile was calm, but full of quiet determination. "Then we will ensure that we are the first to find them, Hastings. For when it comes to mysteries such as this, it is not enough to simply follow the trail. One must also outwit those who walk the same path." With the map and the hourglass in hand, Poirot led the way out of the chapel, his mind already turning over the next steps. Hastings followed, still uncertain but trusting, in Poirot's steady hand. They were close now, closer than ever to unravelling the mystery of the unclaimed luggage, and of the secrets that lay hidden beneath its surface. Chapter 6. The Map's Path. The morning fog had now fully dissipated, and the village of Sutton End looked every bit the idyllic, peaceful town it appeared to be. The cobbled streets were quiet, save for the soft clink of a bell as a postman delivered letters, and the distant chatter of townsfolk setting about their day. But for Hercule, Poirot, the calm beauty of the village was only the surface of a much deeper mystery. "Where do you think the map leads, Poirot?" Hastings asked, his voice filled with a mix of curiosity and concern as they made their way toward the town centre. Poirot adjusted the brim of his hat and glanced down at the carefully folded map in his hands. The ink had faded slightly, but the markings were still legible. A portion of the map indicated a secluded area outside the village, a place that seemed not to exist on any of the modern maps of Sutton End. "There is no doubt in my mind that it leads us somewhere significant," Poirot said thoughtfully. "But where exactly? That is the question we must answer. They walked along the quiet streets, their footsteps echoing against the stone buildings. Poirot's eyes darted from the map to his surroundings as he mentally charted the course. The path indicated on the map led through a narrow lane, flanked by hedgerows that seemed to swallow up the light of the sun. Beyond that, the map suggested a hidden grove tucked deep in the woods. The road leading to this hidden grove was largely overgrown, unused by most of the town's inhabitants. To Poirot, this was already an indication of something unusual. If there was no known reason for the path to be there, what was its purpose? And more importantly, why had someone gone to such lengths to conceal it from view? Perhaps this is where she found what she was looking for. Hastings offered, his voice hesitant. The woman who asked about the chapel, the one who disappeared. Poirot's lips tightened into a knowing smile. Ah, Hastings, you are beginning to understand. The puzzle pieces are falling into place. The woman, let us call her our unknown traveller for now, was no mere visitor. She was searching for something in Sutton End, and she believed that something lay hidden here in these woods. You think it's here in the village? Hastings asked, his brow furrowing. In Sutton End itself? Oui, mon ami, Poirot answered, his eyes gleaming with a quiet determination. There are secrets in every corner of a village, secrets that even its most loyal inhabitants may never notice. But to find them, one must look where others do not. They reached the edge of the village, where the cobblestone streets gave way to a dirt path. The hedgerows loomed tall on either side, casting long shadows over the trail. It was easy to see that this path had been forgotten by most. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and rotting leaves. Poirot paused and studied the ground. His eyes narrowed. There was something unmistakable in the footprints that marred the dirt. Fresh. Recent. Someone had passed this way not long ago. See here, Hastings, Poirot said, pointing to the prints. These belong to a woman, or perhaps a man with a similar gait. It is not the first time someone has taken this path, but it seems they did so in a hurry, hastily, as though they were eager to reach their destination. Hastings looked at the footprints but could make little sense of them. Do you think it's the woman who left the chapel? The one we've been tracking? Poirot nodded slowly, turning his attention back to the map. There is no doubt in my mind. She is on the same trail. We are following in her footsteps, Hastings, and we must be quick, for there are others who would want to see this mystery buried. They continued down the winding path. The Chouge-d'Aille was dense trees closing in around them. The silence was broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze and the crunch of their footsteps beneath them. The further they walked, the more Poirot's mind worked, turning over the clues they had gathered. The hourglass, Poirot mused aloud. The map, the warning. All of these lead us to one thing, a hidden treasure. But not a treasure of gold or jewels. No, it is a treasure of information. Information that has been lost for years, perhaps decades. Hastings was still struggling to keep up with Poirot's train of thought. Lost information? Oui, Poirot replied, his voice calm but filled with quiet conviction. A secret, Hastings. A secret so important that it has been hidden away for years. And now the unknown traveller has come to Sutton End to uncover it. But she is not the only one with that goal. So we're not the only ones chasing this mystery, Hastings asked, his tone sharp with realization. Exactly, Poirot replied, stopping at a small clearing in the woods. There are others who would stop at nothing to find this treasure, to claim it for themselves. But they are not as methodical as we are, Hastings. They do not have the same, how shall I say, precision. Poirot stood at the edge of the clearing, his eyes scanning the area carefully. The trees around them were thick, and the air was thick with tension. In the centre of the clearing, a large stone archway stood, partially covered in ivy and moss. It looked ancient, as though it had been there for centuries. "This is it," Poirot said, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "The place marked on the map. The secret lies here, beneath our feet." They approached the archway, and Poirot's sharp eyes scanned every inch of it, searching for any indication of what lay hidden within. His fingers traced the stonework, brushing aside the ivy as he examined it closely. At first, there seemed to be nothing unusual about the archway, but Poirot's keen eyes had already spotted something. There, in the stone, was a faint symbol, a symbol that matched one of the markings on the map. "This is it, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice filled with excitement. "The symbol on the map! It's here, in the archway itself. This is the key to unlocking the treasure." He pressed his hand against the stone, and with a soft click, the archway shifted. A hidden door, nearly invisible to the naked eye, revealed itself, and beyond it lay a narrow staircase leading down into the earth. "This is it," Poirot said again, his voice steady. "The treasure we've been searching for. The puzzle is nearly complete." Hastings looked at him, his eyes wide with awe and concern. "Do you think we're ready for what's ahead, Poirot? What if we're not alone down there?" Poirot gave him a reassuring smile. "We are more than ready, mon ami. We have the clues, and we have the intellect. We shall face whatever awaits us with calm and resolve." With that, Poirot stepped forward, leading the way into the hidden passage, and Hastings followed close behind. The air grew colder as they descended, the darkness enveloping them as they moved deeper into the earth. The mystery of the unclaimed luggage was about to take its most dangerous turn, and Poirot, as always, was one step ahead. Chapter 7. The Silent Vault. The stone steps creaked softly beneath their feet as Poirot and Hastings descended further into the earth. The cool air thickened with each step, and the flickering light from their torches cast long, jagged shadows on the ancient walls. The hidden passageway wound downward, and the soft echo of their footsteps seemed to grow louder, as if the walls themselves were listening. Poirot, his sharp eyes scanning every detail, held the map tightly in one hand, the other, holding his torch aloft. The markings on the map seemed to grow clearer with each step, and Poirot's mind worked furiously, piecing together the final bits of the puzzle. The vault was close. He could feel it in his bones. And what lay inside, he could only imagine. Hastings, on the other hand, was growing increasingly uneasy. The silence of the tunnel was oppressive, and the damp air made him shiver. He tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but something about the darkness seemed to press down on him, urging him to turn back. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice a little too loud in the oppressive stillness. "Are we sure this is the right path? It feels as if something is watching us." Poirot gave a small, knowing smile. "Hastings, my friend, there are no ghosts here, I assure you. But I understand your feelings. This place has a certain weight to it. It is a place where secrets are buried and mysteries are hidden." "Itu, that it then?" Hastings asked, half laughing at his own nerves. "A hidden treasure? A centuries-old secret?" "Precisely," Poirot replied, his voice calm and measured. "But a treasure, Hastings, that is not gold or jewels, but rather knowledge. Knowledge that someone would go to great lengths to keep hidden. And if we are to uncover it, we must do so carefully." They continued down the winding staircase, their footsteps slowing as the air grew colder still. The tunnel stretched before them, the light of their torches barely illuminating the edges. The walls were smooth, almost too smooth, and the sense of age, of something ancient, permeated the air. At last they reached the bottom of the stairs. The passage opened into a large chamber, its stone walls towering above them. In the centre of the room stood a large iron-bound door, its surface marked with strange symbols that matched the ones on the map. Poirot approached the door, his face illuminated by the flickering torchlight. His fingers traced the symbols, feeling the faint grooves beneath his touch. They were familiar, but not in a way he could immediately place. It was as if they were part of an ancient language, one that had been lost to time. "Do you see, Hastings?" Poirot said softly, his voice filled with awe. "This is it, the vault. And these markings, they are the key to unlocking what lies inside." Hastings stepped forward, peering at the symbols. "You think this door will lead to the treasure?" Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing as he studied the markings more closely. "Yes, but not just any treasure. A treasure of knowledge, Hastings. Information that has been hidden away for years, perhaps longer. Someone went to great lengths to protect it." He stepped back, inspecting the door for any other signs, any indication of how it could be opened. His mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle, the map, the symbols, the hourglass. All were connected, and yet the final piece eluded him. "Perhaps a key is required," Hastings suggested, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Poirot's gaze flicked to the ground, where a small indentation in the stone floor caught his attention. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it was there. Something had been placed here, something that had left a mark. "Ah, but of course," Poirot murmured, his eyes lighting up. "A key. Not a physical one, but a symbol that matches the one on the map. A key, Hastings, that opens not with a turn, but with an understanding." He turned to Hastings, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "The symbols, look at them closely. They are not just markings, Hastings. They are instructions. Instructions that tell us how to unlock the door." Hastings squinted, trying to make sense of the symbols. "You mean the symbols are a sort of puzzle?" "Exactly," Poirot said. "Each symbol represents a step, a sequence. The first step is to align them correctly, and then—" Before he could finish, a sound interrupted him. Footsteps echoing down the corridor. Poirot tensed, his hand moving instinctively to his waist where his revolver rested. "Someone else is here," Hastings whispered, his voice filled with unease. Poirot's mind raced. Who could be following them? Who else knew about this secret passage and the hidden vault? The footsteps grew louder, and within moments a figure appeared at the far end of the chamber. The figure was cloaked in shadow, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Poirot's keen eyes narrowed as he took in the shape. It was a woman. A tall, slender woman with dark hair, her features obscured by the hood of her cloak. She paused at the entrance of the chamber, her eyes flicking over Poirot and Hastings, calculating. "I wondered when you would find it," the woman said, her voice smooth and calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. Poirot stood tall, his expression unfazed. "Ah, mademoiselle," he said, his voice polite but firm. "I take it you are the one who has been following us?" The woman smiled, but there was no warmth in the gesture. "Following? I think you misunderstand, Monsieur Poirot. I have been here long before you. This place belongs to me." Hastings looked between the two, confusion written across his face. "What is this? Who are you?" The woman stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Poirot's. "I am a historian," she said simply, "a keeper of secrets. And this vault, Monsieur Poirot, holds a treasure of knowledge that I intend to keep hidden. You are not welcome here." Poirot's eyes gleamed with an understanding that only he could possess. "Ah, I see. You are the one who has been leaving the clues, the one who has been playing this dangerous game. But you have underestimated me." The woman's eyes flashed. "You think you can stop me?" Poirot's expression remained unchanged. "Not stop you, mademoiselle, but I will unravel your mystery, as I have done many times before." The woman took a step back, her hand moving to a small pouch at her waist. "Then you will see how little you truly understand, Monsieur Poirot." The tension in the air thickened as Poirot and the woman locked eyes. What was she planning? What had she done to ensure the vault's secrets remained hers? The game was far from over, and Poirot was ready for the next move. Chapter 8. The Ticking Clock. The woman's cryptic words lingered in the air long after she had stepped back into the shadows, the soft rustling of her cloak echoing against the stone walls. Poirot stood motionless, his eyes narrowing in contemplation, while Hastings fidgeted beside him, still trying to make sense of the situation. "She claims this vault belongs to her," Hastings muttered, his voice tinged with skepticism. "But why would she be so intent on keeping us away? Surely there's more to this than we can see." Poirot did not immediately respond. His gaze remained fixed on the spot where the woman had stood, his mind turning over the puzzle with the precision of a master chess player. She had shown up at the most inconvenient of moments, and yet Poirot could not dismiss the feeling that her appearance was no coincidence. Everything he suspected was interconnected. "This woman," Poirot said slowly, his voice measured. "She has been playing a dangerous game, Hastings. She knew we would come here. She anticipated every move we made. But why? What is it she fears?" Hastings glanced nervously toward the shadowy entrance, his hand subconsciously brushing against his waist. "Do you think she's dangerous, Poirot?" Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned his attention to the symbols on the vault door. His mind was spinning. There was something crucial in her words, something that hinted at a much larger plan, one he had yet to fully unravel. "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone carefully composed, "she is not the true threat. No, Hastings, she is merely a guard, one who has been placed in our path. What we need to consider now is who placed her here and why." He turned back to the door, the symbols now seeming less like a cryptic puzzle and more like a message, an invitation, or perhaps even a warning. Poirot's trained mind caught the subtle nuances, the way certain symbols were slightly out of alignment, the way the stonework appeared to have been tampered with. The door, for all its age, held secrets not of antiquity, but of something much more recent. "It is as I suspected," Poirot murmured, more to himself than to Hastings. "The symbols are not merely instructions, Hastings. They are a map that shows us more than just the vault. There are hidden chambers beneath this place, rooms that were meant to remain undiscovered." "What kind of rooms?" Hastings asked, his curiosity piqued. "Rooms that contain the true treasure, my friend," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming with the promise of discovery. "But the treasure is not gold or silver. No, it is something far more valuable. Knowledge. The kind of knowledge that can change the course of history." Hastings frowned. But who would go to such lengths to hide knowledge? What could possibly be so important? Poirot's lips tightened into a thin line. "That, Hastings, is the question we must answer. And I believe the woman we encountered knows far more than she is letting on." Before Hastings could respond, the silence was shattered by the unmistakable sound of a ticking clock. Slow at first, but steadily growing louder. Poirot's head snapped toward the sound, his expression alert. The ticking was coming from somewhere within the chamber, reverberating off the stone walls in a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. "Ah, what have we here?" Poirot muttered under, his breath, his mind racing as he pieced together the significance of the sound. The clock. It must be connected to the vault. Hastings followed Poirot's gaze, his own curiosity piqued. But where is it coming from? Poirot's eyes narrowed, and without another word, he moved towards the far corner of the chamber, where a series of stone shelves lined the wall. On one of the shelves, partially obscured by a thick layer of dust, was an ornate wooden box. The ticking sound seemed to be emanating from inside it. Poirot knelt down, carefully inspecting the box. It was small, no larger than a bread box, and beautifully crafted with intricate carvings on its surface. The carvings depicted scenes of what appeared to be ancient rituals. Figures in ceremonial dress, holding up hourglasses, surrounded by symbols that resembled the ones on the vault door. "It is a clock," Poirot said, his voice low with intrigue. "But not just any clock. It is a timepiece, Hastings, one with a purpose. I believe this clock is the key to unlocking the vault." "How can you be so sure?" Hastings asked, still sceptical. Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he carefully lifted the box from its shelf and examined it more closely. The ticking was loud now, filling the room with its steady rhythm. Poirot opened the box, revealing the inner mechanism. Inside was a delicate system of gears, springs, and a small crystal-clear hourglass. The hourglass, Poirot murmured, his finger tracing the edge of the crystal. "It is the symbol, the key. This is what has been hidden all along." Hastings looked over his shoulder, his face a mask of confusion. "You think this hourglass is somehow connected to the vault?" Poirot nodded slowly. "I do, Hastings. The hourglass is not just a symbol of time. It is a representation of something far more significant. I believe it holds the answer to the vault's secret. But we must be careful. If I am right, the hourglass is not meant to be merely admired. It is meant to be used." A sudden sharp noise interrupted their conversation. A creaking sound, followed by the unmistakable scraping of metal on stone. Poirot and Hastings turned in unison, their attention snapping back to the vault door. To their astonishment, the doctor was shifting. It was slowly, almost imperceptibly, beginning to open. Poirot's expression remained unchanged, though the glint in his eyes suggested that he had expected this moment. "It is beginning, Hastings," he said quietly, his voice filled with quiet excitement. "The puzzle is unravelling before our very eyes." Hastings glanced nervously at the door, then back at Poirot. "But what do we do now?" Poirot took a deep breath, his gaze focused on the door. "We wait, Hastings. We wait for the next step to reveal itself. This is not the time to rush. The mystery is far from over." With that, Poirot stepped back, his eyes never leaving the vault as the slow, steady tick of the clock filled the chamber once again, its rhythm guiding them toward the next phase of their investigation. As the door creaked open, revealing only the faintest glimmer of what lay beyond, Poirot knew that this was only the beginning. The puzzle was far from complete, and the truth was still buried deep within the vault's secrets, waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 9. The Revelation in the Shadows. The vault door creaked open with an unsettling slowness, the sound echoing in the chamber like the whisper of a forgotten secret. Poirot and Hastings stood at the threshold, their eyes fixed on the narrow crack that now separated them from the mysteries that lay beyond. The air was thick with anticipation, and Poirot's mind was already racing through the possible scenarios, each one more complex than the last. "The puzzle is unfolding, Hastings," Poirot murmured, his voice low, almost reverent. "But we must be careful. We do not yet know what awaits us behind this door. It could be a treasure of great value, or it could be something far more dangerous." Hastings shifted uneasily, glancing over his shoulder as though expecting an unseen presence to suddenly emerge from the shadows. "What do you think is in there, Poirot?" Poirot remained silent for a moment, his gaze narrowing as he studied the vault's slowly opening door. His fingers tightened slightly around the wooden box with the hourglass, the ticking of the clock inside it growing louder, as if in sync with his growing sense of urgency. "I do not know," Poirot said finally, his tone steady. "But the fact that the door is opening now suggests that someone or something has triggered it, and that is where our attention must lie. We need to understand who or what is behind this." With a swift movement, Poirot stepped forward, his every motion calculated and precise. He reached out to push the door fully open, the heavy stone grinding against the ancient floor, revealing the dimly lit interior of the vault. The air was stale, thick with the scent of age and dust, and the faintest glimmer of moonlight filtered through a narrow slit in the stone, casting eerie shadows across the space. Hastings followed Poirot into the vault, his steps cautious, his eyes darting around in search of any immediate signs of danger. The space was larger than expected, its walls lined with shelves filled with strange artifacts, old books, urns, ornate chests and other objects that seemed out of place in such a solemn setting. But it was the centre of the room that caught their attention. There, on a pedestal illuminated by the pale moonlight, stood a large glass case. Inside the case was an object that neither of them could have anticipated. A golden hourglass, its sands frozen in time, suspended between two intricately carved pillars. The hourglass gleamed with an almost ethereal light, as though it held within it the very essence of time itself. Poirot's gaze flickered between the hourglass and the shelves of objects surrounding them. "The hourglass," he whispered, more to himself than to Hastings. "It is not just a symbol. It is the key, the very heart of this mystery." Hastings took a step forward, his curiosity piqued. "But what is it, Poirot? Why is it so important?" Poirot did not immediately respond. Instead, he moved closer to the pedestal, his eyes scanning the intricate carvings on the glass case. The symbols were familiar now, patterns he had seen before, etched into the vault door, and even into the hourglass itself. They were not just decorative, they were a map, a guide to something hidden, something far more significant than they had originally imagined. "This is not a mere object," Poirot said, his voice tinged with awe. "This is a mechanism, Hastings, a mechanism that has been carefully crafted to hold something far more valuable than gold or jewels. It holds a secret, one that has been waiting for someone like me to uncover." As Poirot spoke, Hastings couldn't help but feel a sense of unease settle over him. The hourglass was beautiful, undeniably so, but there was something unsettling about it. Its stillness, its perfect symmetry, seemed almost too perfect. "Poirot," Hastings said cautiously, "do you think someone has been watching us? That woman, could she be connected to this?" Poirot's lips curled into a slight smile, though his eyes remained fixed on the hourglass. "Ah, Hastings, you are learning. Yes, I believe the woman has been watching us, but she is merely one piece of the puzzle. There are larger forces at work here, forces that have been manipulating events from the shadows. The hourglass is the key to understanding those forces." He turned to face Hastings, his expression serious. "But we must tread carefully. The hourglass is not meant to be touched lightly. There are dangers here, hidden in plain sight, waiting to spring upon anyone who is not prepared." Hastings nodded, still uncertain but willing to follow Poirot's lead. "What should we do now?" Poirot stepped closer to the glass case, his hand hovering just inches from it. "We need to unlock its secrets. We need to understand how this hourglass functions, what it represents. It is not just a timepiece, Hastings. It is a key. The hourglass is linked to something far greater, and we must be the ones to uncover it." Hastings glanced around the room, his eyes falling on the shelves filled with artifacts. He wasn't sure what they were looking for. What could possibly explain the significance of the hourglass? But he trusted Poirot's instincts. "Poirot," Hastings said slowly, "do you think the vault itself is part of the puzzle? Maybe we need to explore the room more thoroughly. There could be more clues hidden among these objects. Poirot paused, his sharp mind already working through the possibilities. Yes, you are correct, Hastings. We must investigate further. The vault is not just a storage space. It is a part of the enigma. Every object here, every artifact, could hold the answer to unlocking the hourglass's secret. The two men began to examine the shelves, each carefully inspecting the items with the precision of detectives who knew that no detail, no matter how small, should be overlooked. They moved silently through the room, their steps muffled by the thick dust that coated everything. As Poirot studied each item, he found nothing that seemed to provide an immediate answer, but the faintest sense of recognition flickered at the back of his mind. Then he stopped. A small, leather-bound book sat on one of the lower shelves, partially hidden behind an urn. Its cover was worn with age, and its pages yellowed with time, but there was something about it that caught Poirot's attention. He pulled it from the shelf, his fingers lightly brushing the cover. "What is it, Poirot?" Hastings asked, noticing the book in Poirot's hands. Poirot opened the cover with delicate care, revealing pages of handwritten notes, sketches, and diagrams. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, as though the writer had been pressed for time. The symbols on the pages matched those on the vault door and the hourglass, and as Poirot flipped through the pages, he found diagrams that mirrored the construction of the vault itself. This book, he realized, was the missing piece of the puzzle. "Seems," Poirot said softly, "that someone has already been here before us. Someone who knew exactly what they were looking for." Hastings peered over Poirot's shoulder, his eyes widening in recognition as he saw the familiar symbols on the pages. "But who wrote this, Poirot? And why would they leave this here?" Poirot closed the book slowly, a deep frown furrowing his brow. "That, Hastings, is what we must discover. The answers are here, but they are still hidden. We are getting closer to the truth. We must not let our guard down now." The room felt even quieter now, as though the very air was holding its breath in anticipation of the next revelation. The hourglass remained frozen in time, its sands still suspended between the two pillars, waiting for the next step in the puzzle to unfold. And Poirot knew, deep in his gut, that they were on the cusp of something momentous, something that would change everything. Chapter 10. The Final Hourglass. The evening air outside the vault had grown chillier, as though nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for the final revelation to unfold. Poirot and Hastings stood in the now silent room, surrounded by the artifacts, the ancient symbols, and the golden hourglass that had brought them here. The mystery was nearly solved, but the final piece of the puzzle remained elusive, like a shadow slipping just out of reach. Poirot stood still, his gaze locked on the hourglass. Its glass surface gleamed faintly under the flickering torchlight, the sands within still and unmoving. The symbol of time, frozen in place, suspended between moments. He felt its weight not just as an object, but as a metaphor for the enigma he had been unravelling. Everything had been leading to this moment. "I know what must be done now," Poirot murmured, his voice low and determined. He turned to Hastings, his eyes alight with the familiar gleam of certainty. We must act quickly, Hastings. The final move is ours to make, but we must be clever, careful. We cannot afford to make a mistake." Hastings, who had been anxiously awaiting Poirot's next words, nodded. "What do we need to do, Poirot?" Poirot's fingers brushed over the surface of the book they had found earlier. It lay open on the stone pedestal, the diagrams and notes revealing their true meaning. He had been right all along. The hourglass was not simply an object. It was a puzzle box, a mechanism that required precision and knowledge to unlock. The vault, with its strange artifacts and hidden symbols, had been designed to protect the secrets within. "The book," Poirot continued, "contains the instructions we need to unlock the final layer of the mystery. It is clear now that the hourglass is connected to a series of movements, a shift in time itself, and someone has carefully constructed this vault to safeguard it. But how do we activate it?" Hastings asked. "How do we open it?" Poirot smiled slightly, the spark of understanding igniting in his mind. "It is not about opening it in the traditional sense, Hastings. It is about moving the sands within it. The key to unlocking this enigma lies in the delicate interaction between the hourglass's two halves. The movement of time itself." The room felt tense with anticipation. Poirot took a deep breath, his fingers gently hovering above the hourglass, as if he were contemplating the very nature of time. Every movement he made was deliberate, his mind calculating, assessing, piecing together the final clues that had eluded them for so long. The book had detailed a subtle process, one that involved not just touching the hourglass, but also aligning it with the unique energies that surrounded it. The symbols they had studied in the vault, the diagrams, had all pointed toward a hidden mechanism. Poirot had realized that it was not enough to simply touch the hourglass or force it to move. They had to unlock it in a manner that was as intricate and delicate as the puzzle itself. With a practiced hand, Poirot lifted the golden hourglass from its pedestal, his fingers trembling slightly with the excitement of discovery. He placed it gently on the stone floor before him, studying it for a moment before turning back to Hastings. "This," Poirot said, "is the key, the solution to everything." Hastings watched as Poirot tilted the hourglass in a precise motion, aligning the two halves with the markings on the book's page. The symbols on the hourglass glowed faintly in the dim light, as if responding to Poirot's touch, and for a moment the very air seemed to hum with energy. Suddenly there was a low click, barely audible but unmistakable. The sands inside the hourglass shifted ever so slightly, a movement so subtle it might have been missed by anyone else. Poirot's eyes widened with realization. "It is done," Poirot whispered. Hastings looked down at the hourglass, and in that moment everything seemed to fall into place. The sands which had once been frozen had now begun to flow, slowly, deliberately, as though the very concept of time had been restored to its rightful course. Poirot had unlocked the mechanism, and the hidden truth had finally been revealed. Poirot's voice broke through Hastings's stunned silence. "You see, Hastings, the true puzzle was never about the hourglass itself. It was about understanding the balance of time, the manipulation of moments, the shifting of history. The one who controls time controls everything." He paused, his eyes now fixed on a small compartment that had opened within the vault's wall, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, nestled among velvet cushioning, was a collection of objects, keys, maps, and a set of documents that explained everything. This was the final piece of the puzzle, the missing link that Poirot had been searching for. Hastings approached cautiously, his heart racing as he recognized the importance of the discovery. "What is it, Poirot? What have we found?" Poirot carefully lifted the documents from the compartment, unfolding them with practiced precision. The first document was a map, an ancient map that detailed a hidden location, one that had long been lost to history. The second document contained a series of names that Poirot immediately recognized as being connected to some of the wealthiest and most powerful families in Europe. It was not just an object of value, Poirot said softly. The hourglass was a message, a key to unlocking something far greater, something that had been hidden for centuries. He turned to face Hastings, his expression grim but satisfied. The true nature of this mystery was never about the hourglass alone. It was about the treasure that lay behind it. These documents, Hastings, they detail a vast fortune, one that has been hidden from the world for generations. The hourglass was the final piece in the puzzle, the last clue to discovering where it lies. Hastings shook his head in disbelief. So all of this, the vault, the symbols, the hourglass, it was all part of a plan to protect this treasure. Indeed, Poirot confirmed. A plan that involved not only hiding the treasure, but ensuring that only the cleverest of minds could uncover its location. And we, my friend, have been the ones to crack the code. A silence fell over the room, the weight of the revelation settling heavily in the air. Poirot placed the documents back into the compartment, his mind already racing with the implications of their discovery. The treasure, its history, its secrets, was now within their grasp. But even as Poirot considered the enormity of what they had just uncovered, he knew that their journey was not yet over. Now, Poirot said with a small smile, we must decide what to do with this knowledge. But that, Hastings, is another puzzle altogether. As the two men turned to leave the vault, the faintest sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Poirot paused, a glint of awareness in his eyes. The mystery was far from over. The shadows of the past had not yet been fully revealed, and those who sought the treasure would not let it slip away so easily. With a final glance at the golden hourglass, Poirot led Hastings from the vault, knowing that the adventure was only just beginning. And as they exited into the night, the ticking of the hourglass seemed to echo through the very fabric of time itself.